guys, welcome to this week's episode of Embrace3 Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon. Today we have a super special guest. His name is Sam. He is from GamePlan_Type 1 Diabetes on Instagram. He runs a website as well. He has a lot of cool things going on about empowering other diabetics and kind of showing off some of the cool diabetic athletes and people who have diabetes and are not letting it slow them down and things like that. So I think that's awesome. So we have him here today as a guest. We're going to do an interview and kind of get an inside look of what he's doing and all that. So I'm super excited to get into that. All right. How's it going, guys? So we have Sam here on the phone. He runs a page and a website. You can find his handle at GamePlan_T1D. I see that your page is all about kind of like inspiring diabetics, specifically kind of the athletes, and I think that's awesome because it shows a lot of the people and aspiring athletes that maybe feel like diabetes might slow them down. That kind of empowers them and show them otherwise. So tell us like a little bit about your page and what inspired you to kind of start all of this.
Yeah, certainly. It's my pleasure to be here on the podcast with you, and love everything that you're doing with your page as well. So GamePlan T1D really came about as a result of sort of my own background in being a diabetic athlete. So I was diagnosed when I was just 5 years old, grew up with diabetes, played football my whole life, and most recently at the college level at Carnegie Mellon University. Just graduated back in May, and as I was graduating and transitioning sort of out of athletics, I was sort of looking at all the different stories about diabetic athletes, and there are some great stories out there, but they were all sort of disparate, and they weren't in a centralized location. There was no Instagram you could go to or website you could go to that kind of had them all listed and was up to date. So that's sort of where the motivation for GamePlan T1D came into play, and I thought I could kind of strive to be that centralized platform for all the stories about diabetic athletes who are out there just crushing it and doing amazing things, and to try to help sort of prove that diabetes doesn't have to be a roadblock athletically, but also more broadly to living a really satisfying, gratifying life. So that's the solution that we're trying to bring to the table. And we started back I had the first idea for GamePlan T1D back in, January of 2018, December of 2017, and did our first podcast in July of this year. And we've now put out, I think this Monday will be our 18th podcast episode. We've got some blog content up as well. And I'm really excited about, and we can talk about this too a little bit later on. This is a really long answer now, but getting into some philanthropic work as we're trying to incorporate it as a nonprofit and do our part to sort of use sports as a platform to raise money for people who need help paying for their insulin, and just trying to do our part to improve access to basic diabetic supplies.
Right, got you. And I think that's awesome because although like insurance helps a little bit, there are like a big difference as to when like a diabetic has like the minimal supplies to where like if someone to you who has like a nonprofit would be able to provide them with like pump supplies or test strips and things like that. So I think that there definitely is like a hole for that, and I think that's cool that that everything you're doing. I think that's crazy, man. 5 years old, that's super young. Do you think like having diabetes at such a young age has like taught me a lot of things? Do you think like now, I know you said you played football all the way through college, which is crazy. I think that's awesome because it can be super tough. Do you was there like a learning curve or like hard to explain, but like while you were training and things like that, do you have any advice for like athletes who like are trying to balance diabetes and like football and all that? Because I know like like when I used to wrestle back in high school, I know it was hard because practice was 3 hours, so like I'd have to like take a second, step out, things like that. But I'm sure you have better ways of going about it that you maybe be help us to explain it.
Yeah, I mean that you really hit the nail on the head. Like being an athlete, being a diabetic is hard in general. Being a diabetic athlete is sort of like an additional burden, like another added layer of complexity. Because like there's extra physical demands, and we're training, and we're trying to perform at a high level competitively. And obviously, we all know that our blood sugar, if it's out of whack, we're not going to perform at our best. So that's really what we're trying to address with our podcast is trying to find what works for different people, and in different sports it's going to be different. So I know for me, when you mentioned like how being diagnosed at 5 kind of plays into it, and really for me, it was just sort of a blessing in disguise being diagnosed so young, because that's always my answer, because I grew up with diabetes and I didn't know anything else than always being accountable for what I was fueling my body with. So I grew up reading nutrition labels and knowing what carbohydrates were, and knowing how, something that's 30 carbs but doesn't have any fat versus a slice of pizza is going to impact, how that impacts our bodies differently. And, I didn't have any, fond memories of picking out on ice cream and not having a bolus and stuff like that. So it was sort of a blessing, as opposed to, some people I hear, get diagnosed when they're in college, and I can't imagine how difficult that must be to take what's been your established lifestyle and you have to do a full 180. But you asked about, advice for athletes, and I think it's really just a lot of trial and error, and you got to find what works for you. So, I mean, there's a number of factors that impact your diabetes and your blood sugar, and depending on your body and depending on the sport you're in, it's going to be a different solution. So I found for me over the years in playing football, that if I could try to introduce as much routine and consistency in the process as I could, that was going to be my best bet. So I know a big challenge that I faced, that a lot of athletes face, is stress before competition. So I remember, Saturday mornings before our games, or Saturday night, whatever it may be, an hour before a game or 45 minutes before a game, my blood sugar would start to spike with the cortisol hormone that gets introduced to your body when you start to sort of get in that adrenaline, stressed out pre-game ritual type of mode. So dealing with that was something that took a lot of trial and error, like I said. And, but I sort of found that, if I had a lower carb meal before the game and knew when to bolus and tried to just do the same thing consistently, that was going to be the best bet. So I think, my advice for athletes would be, through trial and error, find what works for you and just try to be as consistent as possible, leading up to your competition.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely true. I think there's different things that work for different people in all aspects of diabetes. And also going back to what you said, like as being diagnosed at 5 years old, I think that's totally true, and that is like super inspiring for kids who feel like maybe it's not fair that they got it so young. I think that is like so true. Like for me, I was diagnosed young too, so I don't know what I'm missing. Like I saw on one of your podcasts that you interviewed. I think his name was Sebastian, and he got diagnosed at 22, if I'm correct. And he's the guy who. Yeah, I think that's cool. Do you tell me a little bit about that interview? Because that was one of the interviews that kind of stood out to me, and I thought that was like super, super awesome. So like, how cool was that, doing that interview?
Yeah, no, that was really awesome. And he's a really cool guy, really humble. I just put up on our Instagram story, sent over a few of his. He just wrote a book called One Step at a Time. Oh. He sent over some signed copy after our podcast discussion. But as I was saying, he's a great guy, Sebastian Sasseville. His Instagram handle, I think, is Seb Inspires, if you guys want to go check him out. But his story is just so cool because, like you said, he was diagnosed when he was 22, which is, like we were talking about, such a difficult age to be diagnosed at. And it's funny because, like, he's this just super active guy, the most active person you could think you could imagine. And we're talking, and I'm like, so what were you like prior to that? And he's like, I was like, not active. I was like, I like to party. I, wasn't sort of like a couch potato. And I was shocked because you start looking at the things that he's been able to accomplish. And what really stuck with me from our conversation was just his mindset and his goal setting. It was just so remarkable. And for those listeners who aren't familiar with Sebastian's story, obviously diagnosed with T1D at 22. After that, I believe 6 years after that, he climbs Mount Everest in 2008.
Dang.
4 years after that, he runs across the Saharan Desert, which is like 100, misremembering some of the details, but it was like 100-plus mile race,
Wow.
completely self-sustained. And then his latest big endurance accomplishment was in 2014. He ran across Canada. He ran across Canada. Yeah, you're hearing that correctly. It's insane to even fathom, but it's like 4,500 miles. Essentially what he was doing was 5 to 6 marathons a week for 9 months. And on top of that, he was doing, motivational talks in the evening. He was doing interviews about diabetes, all in an effort to sort of raise awareness, about T1D. So he's very, outside of him just having a great mindset, he's just very humble, and you can tell he's doing these things not only to push himself, but to, bring awareness to the T1D cause.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think that, and that's like something that's so cool about your page kind of is like you find these people and you bring them to light to where people, like how I was when I was younger and maybe other kids too, that like sometimes people, even my own parents, were like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do this sport because I know it might be a little harder for diabetes, or you might get low during like a competition or a race, or you might get high during a race or something like that. I think that it's awesome to know that there's people out here like Sebastian and you who did it in football in college and high school, and other people who are like doing powerlifting and stuff I saw throughout your page and your website. I think that it's just so important that like even kids who are like brand new to this know that there are people out there like fighting harder than even people who don't have diabetes. Kind of like how you said like Sebastian wasn't doing much pre-diabetes. So it can be diabetes can definitely be something to where it's like add like it's an extra power, I guess, for lack of better words. But that's awesome, man.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It's like I think diabetics, when they have the right care, are almost like they can almost be like superhuman, just because like we know what that additional burden is and how to be resilient and mentally tough, because diabetes is a challenge. And that's part of the reason why, like, just to quickly return to the philanthropic work we want to try to do, is we want to try to use sports as this philanthropic platform, because everyone can understand sports, everyone can get behind sports, and they're very relatable. And it's just so compelling to see people like Sebastian climbing Mount Everest, and that's all because he, not only because he has a great mindset and he's extremely driven and is an awesome guy, but because he has access to really good diabetes care. It's just very frustrating to me when we have people, even in the United States, let alone in developing countries, where people don't have access to real basic stuff like glucose meters and insulin, but we have people in the United States dying because they don't have access or can't afford their insulin. And to me, that's mind-blowing, and that's an issue that we're very passionate about at Game Plan T1D, and that's something that, from a philanthropic standpoint, we want to try to do our part to solve. So it's that's really what our platform is really all about. We want to try to inspire athletes with the content and these stories with people like Sebastian, and we also want to do our part to empower people by trying to improve access to really quality care.
Right, and I think that's great, because I think that a lot of people will see this and want to help out and kind of help your cause, and I think that's awesome. I saw that on your website you have like a place to kind of put your email, so that way whenever you do get certified to become like nonprofit, people will be able to donate. Is it just like a kind of like a waiting game type of thing, like waiting to get approved, all that type of thing?
Yeah, so we're in the process now, and I say we as a platform right now, it's pretty much just myself, and I have a few different people sort of advising me from a legal standpoint, but I'm really trying to rush to get our platform incorporated as a nonprofit and to get our 501c3 status from the IRS, so that people can reap the benefits from a tax standpoint of having their donations be tax deductible, which is an important part of the process legally. So, and also just, it signals to everyone that we're the real deal and that,
definitely.
we stand by, the words we say, and that, like, the majority of our dollars will go towards solving the issue of improving access to diabetes care. So, but like you said, it is definitely a waiting game, and in the meantime, it gives me a chance to really focus on putting quality content out there that can inspire people and, hopefully teach people some good lessons.
Yeah, definitely, man. I agree, and it sucks that it's kind of like the whole legal back and forth thing, but definitely, if you guys do go onto his website, you can find it through his Instagram page. Again, that's gameplan_T1D. There's a way that you can put your email so that when it is available, you'll be able to donate, which is really cool. So, almost kind of wrapping up, what have you learned from all of this? And as far as just your own personal life of being a diabetic, growing up with it, having it at 5 years old, playing sports with it and everything like that, and as far as what have you learned while starting and growing and running this organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, it's just one of the things that stood out to me the most has just been the T1D community and how receptive and awesome people are. Like I love that we're just having this call right now. And, I get the chance to meet cool people like yourself. And, starting out Game Plan T1D, it was just this, it was really just an idea. And then some of the early talks I had with KDRF, where they kind of were like, oh, this could potentially work. And then sort of reaching out to the athletes. I do all my outreach through social media, more or less. And, I was at a Chili's just sitting there, and I sent Gary Hall Jr., who's a 5-time Olympic gold medal swimmer, a LinkedIn message. And I'm eating dinner at Chili's with my sisters, and he sends me a LinkedIn message back just saying, hey, here's my cell, and let's make this interview happen. And it's just like, who am I to have conversations with these people? But I'm just so grateful that they're, that they want to use their story to empower other diabetics. And if I can sort of be the conduit or the platform and the mouthpiece to sort of bring those stories together, I feel very blessed that I get to have that privilege and that opportunity. So it's just been very rewarding for me from a community standpoint that there are such like awesome people like yourself out there doing things on social media to try to help other diabetics. And it kind of restores for me a little bit sort of the faith in humanity that there are so many awesome individuals out there doing things from an advocacy standpoint to try to improve the lives of other diabetics. And I'm just very happy that I get to be a part of that movement to uplift the diabetic community.
Yeah, man, definitely. That's beautiful, man. I can't believe that's so cool. Like, that's so true, though. Like, I have noticed that the type 1 diabetic community is so, like, helpful. They're all open-armed. Like, they're all willing to help each other out and share advice and empower each other. And I think that's so, so great. That's awesome, man. And shout out to Chili's. It's my favorite restaurant. But, all right, man. Last thing. Do you have any advice for newly diagnosed diabetics or even diabetics who've been diagnosed for like a long time? People maybe who do want to do the whole, like, who are trying to join sports or maybe feeling a little discouraged, or just maybe some diabetes advice in general?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually end my podcast with this question to all the athletes, and
that's awesome.
I always get, a number of different responses. And it's kind of funny because I, full disclosure, have been going through a bit of a rough patch myself, and transitioning out of college football has been, a big challenge because, this outlet that I had of exercise and training and fitness has kind of been taken away, and I'm trying to sort of adjust and move forward now. So it's like, I'm trying to think, how do I apply all of the lessons I've learned from my podcast with those guests asking that same question. So I think my advice to a newly diagnosed diabetic is that ultimately in the long run, you're going to be stronger because of your T1D diagnosis. We're at the point now where, we're coming into some of the best technology that's been around in, hybrid closed loop systems and insulin pumps and CGMs and all of that. And, it's initially going to be daunting, and there are going to be scary times. And no matter how long you've had T1D, I've had it for, 18 years or so. Everyone has bad days, and it will pass. The scariness will pass, and we'll establish healthy routines. But another big thing is that you always have to be learning. Like I said, I've had T1D for 18 years, and there can be days where you just experience something that you've never experienced before, and in that sense, you always have to kind of be on your toes and be ready and willing to learn and adapt to your body and to your diabetes. So I would say I kind of gave like 4 or 5 different answers there, but I would just say, understand that I really think it's a blessing in disguise, because you're gonna be mentally strong, and mentally stronger because of your diabetes, and also, always be learning and look at it as an opportunity to really be accountable for your health and for your wellness, and, from the food you're eating to the sleep you're getting to how you're handling stress, all of that impacts your diabetes. So you really have to be on top of all that. So rather than looking at it as a burden, look at it with a positive frame of mind and think, okay, how can I optimize my health? And that's really going to impact your diabetes, in a great way. So I would say just try to find the silver lining in all of it if you can.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I agree with all that, and all that stuff is like really, really helpful and inspiring. I know that, with your page as well, like that silver lining becomes so much more clear. I think that's awesome. It definitely can be something that can empower you and push you, rather than like hold you back. I think that's cool, and I think that what you're doing is like such a good like enforcer of that, and I think that's so cool, man. But yeah, thank you so much, man, for being on the show. You've been awesome. I feel like I'm gonna like do a couple laps around my neighborhood, maybe go lift some weights. I don't know, man. I feel inspired. But yeah, if you guys haven't already, go follow this guy. He's awesome. His name is GamePlan_T1D. But as far as that goes, I'm gonna give you the floor, kind of, to take as long as you want. Maybe let us know how we can follow you, where we can connect to you, where we can go to kind of be more involved with what you're doing. So, floor is yours, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was my pleasure being on the podcast, and really love everything you're doing with the Embrace movement. And, if you want to follow us, we're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at GamePlanT1D. We do a weekly podcast with different diabetic athletes, and we try to essentially uncover what it is that allows them to excel despite their diabetes. A lot of our podcasts deal with, more professional athletes, but we also have blog content with more recreational athletes, high school level athletes, even youth athletes, to show people that, you don't have to be a professional to be a diabetic athlete. And, we have people on our blog who are trying their first 5K. So we really try to provide a spectrum of different diabetic athletes in their accomplishments. So, those are our Instagram or our social media handles. We also have our website, www.gameplant2nd.com, where you can go to find more related content. And also, as you mentioned, sign up to receive a notification once we officially incorporate as a nonprofit, so you can help empower diabetics from our philanthropic standpoint. But that's pretty much it, man. Like I said, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast and giving me a chance to sort of talk to your following. And like I said, I'm a big fan of everything you guys are doing, so keep it up.
Thank you, man, so much. I appreciate your time, man. Take care.